say, Mr. Raj Subramaniam. And to steer that session, we have as moderator the Chairperson and Managing Director, Tractors and Farm Equipment Limited, India, Ms. Mallika Srinivasan. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's over to Ms. Srinivasan to steer that session.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to all of you to this plenary session. We have a power-packed panel today, an outstanding array of speakers, and I think you will agree that my job is unenviable. So I would like to do my best to keep this on schedule. Here on the panel, we have the world's most eminent thought leaders, strategists of global trade, and leading global CEOs for what promises to be a very rich discussion on the evolving dynamics of global trade and investment and the innovative, sustainable, collaborative approaches to addressing these. I will take just a minute to set the context for today's discussions and then request each of our eminent speakers. I will introduce them and request each one to just take a minute or two to give their opening comments, and then we'll try to keep it with some questions from the chair, but I would request you all to forward your questions up, and we will try to take as many as possible at the end of the session. Unforeseen, unexpected events, pandemics and political shifts, for example, that have sharply disrupted GVCs over the last few years have moved resilience center stage, highlighting the need for GVCs to be architected and built not merely to withstand shocks, but to thrive in the face of adversity. Government, institutional, and corporate leaders now agree that resilience is our key challenge to long-term growth, and that it calls for collaborative and agile frameworks in terms of policy, cross-border partnerships, government-private sector collaboration, and corporate strategic initiatives. Long-term resilience of trade and supply chains that are built on long-established supply partnerships and interconnectedness that has enabled growth has to now bring in the elements of resilience, energy security, and climate change, making sustainability a very intrinsic part of any resilience strategy. In this year's B20 discussions, we also had fair amount of deliberations on the transformative power of digital technology, Trade 4.0, as there was a reiteration to the B20's commitment to inclusivity, both aspects being in the context of developing resilient GVCs and an accelerated GDP and global trade growth. Our panel discussion this afternoon, therefore, focuses on the themes of building resilience in the new world context alongside sustainability, inclusivity, digital technology, these being the building blocks and interconnected themes for long-term resilience. Let me introduce first our first two speakers. I'll just try to make this as interactive and not monotonous in the introduction, so just let me do two speakers to begin with. Our first speaker this afternoon is an ardent advocate of the resilience agenda, often stressing its crucial role in safeguarding global GDP, its positive impact both in the short and the long term, and the significant cost of lost opportunity in the absence of the resilience agenda. In his earlier roles as minister in the Norwegian government, covering a variety of portfolios that included environment, trade and commerce, and foreign affairs, and then through his passionate leadership of the World Economic Forum, Mr. Borge Bende, president, has been one of the most thoughtful thought leaders, impactful thought leaders, and a catalyst for transformation across governments and global businesses. We look forward to hearing from you, Mr. Bende, on the crucial role of resilience with an emphasis on climate competitiveness, circular trade, climate FDI, and the emerging area of trade tech. Your insights on innovative strategies to fortify GVCs and boost growth in evolving and volatile landscape would set the tone for our panel discussions. Our second panelist is His Excellency Sultan Ahmed bin Sulaim, Chairman and CEO of DP World. As one of the leading providers of smart logistics solutions, DP World moves approximately 10% of global trade. Under Sultan bin Sulaim's dynamic leadership, DP World's strong growth and global strategy has as its central themes a long-term perspective on investment, a strong emphasis on sustainability and technology, and multidimensional partnerships in its approach to infrastructure development in LDCs with a view to enhancing inclusivity and participation of LDCs. A strong proponent, I know, Sadan, you're a strong proponent of free trade. We look forward to your perspectives and building resilience through a holistic approach. Let me first request our first two speakers, Ms. Brende and Mr. Sulaim, to first make your opening comments, and we'll come in with some questions.
Thank you so much, and congratulations to India on its G20 presidency. It is really nice to come a place where you can feel what optimism is again. There is a lot of optimism in India. That's the basis also of India's presidency. Fastest growing of the large economies in the world, 3 years in a row, and there is no reason why this will not continue. Unfortunately, the global growth is more sluggish. We at the World Economic Forum expect 3% economic growth this year, and we know that the engine behind growth in the past has been trade and using different countries' comparative advantages. Of course, we have to adjust. After COVID, we learned that we could not only think just in time, but also just in case. But it is very important that we don't lose the baby with the bathwater, because trade was the engine behind growth. And our economist has also looked at what will the consequence be if we follow this decoupling thinking, that we only friendshore or nearshore. It will have big impact also on the future prosperity of our planet. If you went totally into a decoupling, we would probably lose around 8 to 10% of global GDP. That is more than the worst depression has led to. So there is a lot at stake, and speaking to the G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant yesterday, I know that India also during its presidency is really looking at how to also secure the global value chains. Global value chains is at the core also for future growth. So there is a lot at stake when we are looking at the trade system moving forward. And it has to be adjusted. It has to adjust for climate change. It also has to be more inclusive. But we will have to find ways of trading with each other. And this whole notion of friendshoring, I'm questioning that. Who are our friends? Is South Africa our friend? Is Nigeria our friend? Is Brazil our friends? Of course. I think what we should continue to do is to let countries be competitive, and we let countries buy where they find it most relevant for their business and for their input. So I think a strong message from the B20 and from India is that future prosperity, future poverty eradication will also be based on open trade, strong global value chains. That's a prerequisite also for future prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Sultan.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure and honor to be with you here today and to share our views and discussions at this important summit and with the global leaders that I have great respect for. Of course, global value chains are crossroads that could lead to regional realization of trade for years to come. We face challenges in the term of geopolitical, environmental, and other crises that keep popping. But one thing for sure, as people in the transportation, we learned from the crisis that we faced, and we are more resilient. That doesn't speak much about the supply chain, which showed how fragile it is during COVID, as well as during many of the crises that happened, even the crisis of the blockage of the Suez Canal, how much it delayed. That means we, in the transportation, have to work better, have to improve the transportation supply chain. To that end, DP World invested heavily in some hard infrastructure as well as soft infrastructure. Soft is digitalization. Today, even though we are in digital age, 80% of the transaction in the transportation is still on paper. And we have launched many platforms, including cargos, which helps us to communicate with our people, to reach our customers, and to provide end-to-end solutions. In the transportation, a lot of costs are associated with bringing cargo from end to end. And if you look at, for example, Africa, landlocked countries, almost 40% of the cost they pay is for the infrastructure inability. In India, roads are not capable to handle the cargo. And so we use rail, and we are like the second largest rail operator in India. And India growth is amazing, and I want to congratulate India for leading the G20. Today, one of the geopolitical issues that are facing people hopefully will be resolved better as we cooperate. And I really want to remember the BRICS meeting, which happened in South Africa, where 6 countries have been invited to the BRICS. UAE is among them, and we are very proud with that, because this major agreement gives advantages to countries that are members. Also, thank you. UAE has a comprehensive free trade agreement with India, and actually almost the trade that was achieved is a huge compared to before it. So naturally, when there are less restrictions, less obstacles, people can communicate and do trade very well. I hope that WTO and a platform like this, the B20, will be critical and influential in removing some of the obstacles we face in our business. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me come in with one question to each of our panelists to get the discussion going. And Mr. Prende, you emphasized a balanced approach between global growth, global trade, and friendshoring. But I want you to touch upon it a little bit more, because how can policy makers navigate the intricacies of crafting an effective policy to enhance supply chain resilience that requires a delicate balance between promoting local production and maintaining global trade, but to ensure that protectionist measures don't undermine international cooperation, while still fostering domestic industries that are essential for both resilience and national security?
Well, thank you for that question. First, I just would underline that if we were to move away from the paradigm that has been leading to incredible results the last decades, I think we can also move into a decade of very slow and sluggish growth. So we can see a repetition of the 70s, where we almost did not grow. So one also, of course, has to look at aspects of today's global value chains, where one cannot only rely on one producer. One has to diversify. We're seeing this also with manufacturing. We're seeing, for example, manufacturing now growing very fast in India. We're seeing growing very fast also in Vietnam and other emerging markets. I think that diversification will continue. The notion of this friendshoring, I think, is quite a worrisome thing, because as I already alluded to, who is going to define who are your friends? I think it's a slippery slope. But the reality is that you are seeing diversification in the supply chains, but that is very important that that doesn't lead to so much higher prices that we will see increased inflationary pressure. That will also, over time, decrease global growth. So there are very fine balancing acts here that we are faced with. I think also we will only realize the importance of the global value chains too late if we know are moving into also a different paradigm based on today's geopolitics. And when it's too late, it is too late. And then we can easily end up in a slow growth period. And then we can just, we will not meet the overall sustainable development goals, eradicate all extreme poverty by 2030. I think openness in markets, of course, comes with challenges too, if you're not prepared. But every country that works on its competitiveness, to open your home market over time is also a good way of teaching your industry on how to succeed in the global competition. Because in your home market, you have comparative advantages. And over time, we have seen all the countries that have gone from being lower middle income countries to really succeed as industrialized countries. They always have opened their home market. Tougher competition, maybe you lose once or twice, but there, if you succeed, you're then also ready to go abroad. So I think visionary leaders also open up for competition, are not afraid of competition. Also, like India today, is ready for it because India has 1.4 billion people. Half of them are less than 27 years old, and most of them are digitally connected. And that is, of course, the new part of the situation that we're faced with, that you have to be digitally connected, and you have to be open societies for what that brings on. Thank you.
Thank you. It compels me to, I promised to ask only one question, but it compels me to ask one more. Picking up from your comment on India, a while ago, you said India is ready for this, and while this is a B20 meeting, we are here in India, and you said India was ready for it. True, you were bullish about the manufacturing sector. In your earlier comments earlier this year, you were quite bullish about the manufacturing sector in India, and therefore I'd like you to share your thoughts on what would take India forward. What do you believe would be taking India forward in the years ahead, and what are some of the challenges that you think that the country should brace itself up for?
I think India now is facing the so-called snowball effect. You know, if a snowball starts, maybe it's easier for a Norwegian with that analogy, but when the snowball starts to roll, it gets bigger and bigger very fast. And I think now India is on that row. And of course, the demography helps a lot. You will be in a situation where you have a positive impact from your demography 30 to 40 years to come, while other countries are fighting this. On the manufacturing side, I think that is also now big time coming in India. What is important for India, though, is to continue its reforms, build better infrastructure, invest also in education. I think that's a prerequisite also for further success. But I'm very, very bullish on India. We think at the World Economic Forum that in a few years, India is going to be the third largest economy in the world. And congratulations on that. I think the $3 trillion US dollars economy is going to be a $10 trillion US dollars economy in a decade, and is going to be larger than Germany and Japan only in a few years. So continue the reforms, but also take more global leadership, because India can also have very positive impact on the so-called swing states. So let's see Indian leadership in bringing the world forward, also when it comes to openness. It is the world's largest democracy too, and I think that's also important to underline. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me move to Sultan. I know you're an ardent proponent of free trade. Liberalization of trade builds resilience. And I quote you, and I say liberalization of trade builds resilience. Would you share your comments and perspectives? For liberalization of trade builds resilience. So would you share your thoughts?
Absolutely. I mean, today, I think I'll speak about something interesting, is that people have been speaking about nearshoring. And that was something that we spoke in the 2014, 13. It was an idea. But when COVID happened, people realized that you cannot rely on a product produced in one part of the world and shipped all the way to the other part. And I mean China and the Far East. And it is evident today that trade has to come and manufacturing has to come to where the countries are consuming. So the factory should be in the consumer market. And you will see now, like example, Apple moved their mobile phones to be manufactured in India. And congratulations to India, and I think India has the infrastructure and the regulations. But the key is, if you want to become an export country, then the laws have to be changed to be more liberal, to allow people to export and fast-track exports, remove many of the restrictions, and also customs around the world. Custom is key today, and custom need to be improved. Procedures need to use digital, need a system that is easy, and hopefully everybody will use a similar form. In the World Customs Organization, there's something called authorized economic operator, which is basically an agreement between two countries where each country will qualify certain top companies and the counterpart will qualify and they'll give them a fast track. In UAE, we signed it with India, we signed it with Korea, and I'll encourage more and more of these agreements to be signed, because if customs can coordinate with the other customs, it is better than even the free trade. Because the biggest problem in every country are the customs. I don't care what agreement they made, the custom will follow their own procedure. But this is part of the custom DNA and custom regulation that could be used. So between an effective role of WTO, where today WTO is sitting, and they have rules, they have agreement, but many parts of the agreement are not implemented. We need to implement them. We need to enforce them.
Thank you. I think his responses would have evoked many questions from the audience, which I request you to send up for question time. Let me just move to our next two panelists. Our next panelist and speaker, Mr. Robert Mærsk Uggla, Chairman of the Board, AP Møller Mærsk Denmark, is an iconic leader whose leadership within the maritime industry has redefined the global trade and logistics paradigm. And his leadership has evolved into an integrated logistics player, adopting strategies to local markets, and we see some of that in our own market with the three-wheelers going around. We see that innovatively redefining customer expectations on efficiency, transparency, flexibility, and resilience, and we see sustainability woven into the heart of your strategy towards a net zero goal by 2040. Leveraging opportunities in growth markets, Mærsk is bullish on investments in the global south, and we look forward to Mr. Robert Uggla's perspectives on resilient growth through sustainability, inclusivity, technology, and long-term investments. I hope that's broad enough topic for you today. And now let me just introduce our second speaker as well before I hand over. Mr. Francisco Gomes Neto, President and CEO, Embraer, and co-chair of my task force on inclusive GVCs for resilient global trade and investment. He's been a key contributor to the B20 deliberations and the policy paper on resilient GVCs. An advocate of globalization, he's a visionary force in the aerospace industry with a deep understanding of supply chains, and enriches our dialogue today with insights that transcend borders. Embraer's focus, and I'm quoting you, Francisco here, minimizing carbon footprint by remaining dedicated to innovative solutions, is promising in terms of breakthroughs in commercial aviation and urban air mobility. So we look forward to hearing from you on the supply chain challenges to address towards enhanced resilience and the future of supply chain architectures. We already had one viewpoint earlier from Mr. Purge on supply chain architecture and tapping new market opportunities. And I will repeat my emphasis on balancing efficiency, resilience, and national priorities. So over to you, First Robert.
Thank you. It's a great privilege to be here, to be at this conference, and to be in India. You know, coming from Europe, I can tell you it's a real tonic to be in India. A great deal of optimism and so much talent. So we are very excited. We're excited about your national logistics policy, and we're very excited about what our customers are doing in